This one promise I'll keep. My little, you will sleep. You will sleep and sleep and sleep. But in return for this kind deed, inside your dreams I'll creep. Shall I tell you of the Fae of Merlin's Crag? Some many hundred years ago, there was a poor man who worked on a farm as a laborer in Lancashire. He was what is sometimes known as an aura man. He had no particular work, but he was expected to take on any odd jobs that came the way. One day, his lord sent him out to cast peats on a piece of moorland that lay on a part of the farm. It was curiously shaped, this piece of land, and known as Merlin's Crag. Well, nobody knows exactly why it was called that, but the country folk said that the famous magician Merlin had once lived there. The man did as he was told. He was a very hard-working person. He always did as he was asked, and when he got to the moor, he got right down to work. It was quite a difficult task. There was a lot of peat that needed to be lifted from near the crag. And as he was working, he was startled by the appearance of a very small, tiny little woman. He had never seen so tiny a woman in his life. She was about 2 feet and dressed in green with red stockings and had long hay-colored hair. It was loose about her shoulders. She was such a small little creature. The countryman stopped working, put down his shovel, and just stared at the tiny little creature. He was even more surprised when she turned and said to him, "Hey, you, buddy, how would you feel if I sent my husband to uncover your house? You humans think that you could do whatever you want." She stamped her little foot and added in a voice of command, "Put that grass back, or you'll regret it." The poor little man, he'd often heard of the Fae, and of all the problems they could bring about to humans who offend them. He was afraid and trembling, so he started to undo all his work, put everything back as he had found it. When he was done, he turned to tell the Fae, but she was gone. Vanished. He took up his shovel and went home and straight to his lord and told him the whole tale. He suggested that in the future the grass should be taken from somewhere else. The lord, he laughed. He had no belief in ghosts or elves or fays. He only believed what he had seen with his own 2 eyes, and even then, he was always certain there was some logical explanation, and even though he was amused by the peasant's story, he was a little put out that he had been foolish enough to believe such nonsense and hadn't done as he was asked. Nay, as he was told. The Lord ordered the man to go back with the horse and the cart, and to take all of the grass out as he had been ordered. Well, what could the man do but obey? He really didn't want to. But did it. And it seemed that nothing bad happened. Perhaps the Fae realized he was doing it against his wishes and did not curse him. I mean, Faes are known to be such rational creatures. Well, everything seemed to go normally, so he thought maybe it was all just his imagination. Maybe all that hard work had made him hallucinate. He began to doubt and forgot his fear of the Faes. Winter passed, then spring, summer, and autumn came once more. And on the very day, in fact, a whole year had passed to the day when he first tried to pull up the peat and then was sent back to finish the job. On that day, when the sun set, the oarman left the farm to go home to his cottage. And as his lord was very happy with him because he had been working very hard lately, he gave him a little can of milk as a present to carry home to his wife. He was so very pleased, and as he walked, he started singing to himself. His road took him by Merlin's Crag, and as he came by, he was surprised to find himself growing more and more sleepy. His eyelids drooped over his eyes as if he was going to sleep, and his feet grew as heavy as lead. He thought to himself, well, I'll just sit down a few minutes and rest. How strange and long and tiresome the road home today seems to be. So he sat down on a bit of grass, right under the shadow of the crag. And before he even knew what was happening, he fell into a deep, dark sleep. When he finally woke up, it was near midnight. The moon was high up in the sky on the crag. As he rubbed his eyes by the soft light of the moon, he became aware of a large group of Fae that were dancing round him, singing and laughing, pointing their fingers at him and shaking their wee fists in his face. The bewildered man rose and he tried to walk away from them, but it didn't matter which way he tried to go. The Fae went with him, keeping him in their magical ring. He could not escape. Finally, they stopped their dancing, and with screams in an elven language, led the prettiest and smallest of their companions up to him and cried, tread a measure, O man, then wilt thou not be so eager to escape from our company. Now the poor man was but a clumsy dancer, and he held back, embarrassed, but the Fae who had been chosen to be his partner reached up and grabbed his hands, and by some strange spell, which seemed to enter through his body, in a moment he found himself waltzing and whirling, sliding and bowing, as if he had done nothing else but dance all his life. And strangely, he forgot everything else but the Fae and the dance. He forgot his house and his home, his children and his wife, and even the little bottle of milk given to him by his lord. All he wanted to do was stay with the Fae and dance, dance, dance the night away. All night long they were mad, and the old man danced with them. Until at last, a shrieking sound came over the moor. It was the cock from the farmyard crowing its loudest, welcoming the coming dawn. In that instant, the party stopped, and the Fae, screaming with alarm, came together and rushed towards the crag, dragging the old man with them. As they reached the rock, a mysterious door which he never saw before opened of its own accord, and shut with a clang as soon as the Fae had all trooped through. The door led to a large, dimly lit hall, full of tiny little chairs and couches and tables. This is where the Fae went to rest, tired with their dancing and partying. The old worker sat down on a piece of rock in a corner, wondering what they'd do to him. But the spell had not been broken, because even when the Fae awoke and began to go about their household chores, or to carry out certain curious practices he'd certainly never seen or done before, which, as you'll discover, he was forbidden to speak of afterwards. He was happy to sit there and watch them, and had absolutely no thought of escape. As it became evening, one of the Fae touched his elbow. He turned round with a gasp and saw the little woman with the green dress and scarlet stockings, who had chided him for taking out the grass last year. She was just there, standing at his side. "The grass that you took from the roof of my house has finally grown back, so you can go back home again. Justice is served. Your punishment has lasted long enough. But first, before you leave, you must take a solemn oath that you will never tell any humans what you have seen and heard while you lived amongst us." He swore, crossed his heart, and hoped to die. Then the door opened, and he was free to leave. The little bottle of milk was still on the grass, just where he'd left it when he went to sleep. It seemed to him as, well, it was all only yesterday that his lord had given it to him. But when he reached his home, he quickly discovered just how wrong he was. His wife looked at him like he was a ghost, and the children whom he had left, barely able to walk, were now well-grown boys and girls, looked at him like he might be a stranger. "Where have you been all these long, long years?" said his wife, when she finally recovered from her shock and realized that it was not his ghost, but her actual husband in the flesh. "How could you leave me and the children alone? Don't you know how we've suffered all these years?" It was then that he realized that though he had passed but a day in Feyland, it had been 7 whole years, and he realized just how heavy the punishment of the Fae folk had been, and of the Lord's punishment. Oh, the Fae, they have their way, and many years to them are but a day. And who's to say if even today their punishments